Welcome in, Ravens flock. This is Jordan with Ravens Flash Report, and with the combine over and the draft just about 8 weeks away, I wanted to take a look at those who raised or affected their stocks at the combine after their performance or lack of participation. Just as a heads up, I'm going to be approaching this from a Ravens want/need perspective, so even if a quarterback or a tight end did great at the combine, I'm not really going to be taking that too much into consideration as we're quite comfortable at those positions. My main focuses are going to be on the wide receiver, running back, offensive tackle, and defensive line groups. Having said that, I must also point out that I am not Cole Jackson and I am not all 22 films when it comes to assessing NFL level talent, but I do have fun speculating and looking at potential additions for the Ravens from the draft. So, let's get to it. So we're going to go position by position group here, and we're going to look at 5 players from each of those groups. We're going to move kind of quick, and I don't want to give too much exposition as I'm going to be doing a top players the Ravens should take in the draft video in a week or two. So let's start with the defensive line group and some of the top names being thrown around, starting with Byron Murphy from Texas. 6 foot, 297 pounds, 21 years old. Byron comes in at 6 foot, which is a little bit shorter stature than you would really want at a defensive lineman, but his impressive athleticism at the combine was needed to show that it can offset that in the NFL. Being a fast, strong, and relentless pass rusher will be a big reason Byron is taken early in the draft. With his ability to show off his quickness and explosive power at the combine, it looks like it more solidified his stock than really moved it at all. Next up is Javon Newman from Illinois, 6'2", 304 pounds, 21 years old. Having had off-season surgery on his foot kept Javon from being able to participate in the combine. He assured everybody that his recovery is on schedule, however, and there are some concerns about his size and wingspan, but his sack production and tackling will no doubt be intriguing to NFL teams who lack interior line pressure. Not participating in the combine doesn't really seem to have a significant impact on his draft stock. Next up, Braden Fisk, Florida State, 6'4", 292, 24 years old. Having a fast 40 time at 4.78 seconds, especially for his 6'4 frame and nearly 300 pounds, will help even with his slightly shorter arm length at just 31 inches. At 24 years old, he is fully developed physically, and his strength in his explosive lower body will attract many NFL GMs at this immediate impact. The combine was a huge boon for Braden before the draft. Next up, Chris Jenkins from Michigan. 6'3", 299 pounds, 22 years old. At 6'3" and 300 pounds, Jenkins is a good size for the interior defensive line of any team, and after putting up a decent 40 time at sub 5 seconds and a great broad jump and bench press, he has shown the well-roundedness of his abilities physically. The combine certainly made it harder for teams to pick between several of the top D linemen, and Jenkins made it harder by throwing his own hat in the ring, and already is being linked to at least 6 teams before the draft. Devondre Sweat, Texas. 6'4", 366 pounds, 22 years old. Sweat is a large individual, which is an understatement, but in the NFL, he's going to need to pair that size with strength, as there are also other few large individuals in the NFL that he's going to be going up against. His hand size, arm length, and wingspan will help a lot in that regard, and in clogging any gaps or simply not allowing offensive linemen to get a good hold on him or moving him out of the way. Teams will look at his size and ability to move other large men backwards as a huge reason to take Sweat in the first 2 rounds after his combine performance. Next group is the running backs, starting with Jonathan Brooks from Texas, 6 foot, 216 pounds, 20 years old. Brooks is the only back in this short list that didn't participate in the combine, but it most likely won't keep him out of the second round where he's projected to go in the draft. At 6 foot, 216 pounds, he is ready to step right into a workhorse role for almost any team with explosive running and a non-combine 40 of 4.45 seconds. He's a decent blocker and a serviceable receiving back, making him a highly coveted back in the draft. Jalen Wright from Tennessee is 5'10", 210 pounds, 20 years old. Jalen might be the biggest winner of the combine from the running back group, running a 4.38 40 with a 38-inch vertical and an 11'2" broad jump. That's some serious athleticism, and pair that with his ability to break ankles and elusive running style, he's going to be among the first few backs taken in the late second or early third round. Next up is Blake Corum from Michigan, 5'8", 205 pounds, 23 years old. Coming in as the national champion and at 23 years old, he's a well-known player at this point. So what did the combine do for Blake? It showed he is as advertised, a quick and effective runner and pass catcher who's surprisingly strong for his undersized frame, which he showed off in the bench press. He won't be the first back drafted, but he is the perfect target for a team who needs a running back to start day one with experience. Next up, Trey Benson, Florida State. 6 foot, 216 pounds, 21 years old. In a similar vein to Jalen Wright, Benson showed his burst and mobility at the combine, boasting a nearly identical 40 time of 4.39 and a 10-yard split of 1.52. He's an explosive runner, but scored low on the vertical with a 33.5-inch jump, while also scoring well with a 10'2" broad jump. Benson's going to see a lot of work as a 3-down back pretty much right away, as he's shown good pass blocking in the backfield, which is a strength that many teams are going to covet. And last for the running back position, Brillan Allen from Wisconsin. 6'1", 235 pounds, 20 years old. Allen is a physical specimen, and while I don't like making pro comps too early, I can't help but see him as a slightly smaller Derrick Henry. With a non-combine 40 time of 4.4 seconds paired with his impressive size and strength at the running back position, he's more likely to run through you than over you and not make you miss. His pass blocking leaves something to be desired, but as a short yard gainer and a goal to go back, I don't think there's a better one in the draft than him. But now let's talk about possibly the most important position group for the Ravens to take a look at in the upcoming draft, offensive tackle. For this group, there's really little reason for me to tell you about a player like Joe Alt or J.C. Latham, as they're going to be long gone before the Ravens are on the clock. So I will instead be putting up 5 players that could be or should be available when the Ravens are up, starting with Augustus Mims, Georgia, 6'8", 340 pounds, 21 years old. Mims is a large, fast, and powerful athlete, which is true for a lot of guys in the draft at the tackle position. But running the 40 at his size in almost 5 seconds is crazy, and add in his 9'3" broad jump, you have a dynamic tackle with 36-inch arms, which is just what teams are looking for when drafting a big man on the outside. With a mid-first round projection, it's not likely he falls to the Ravens, but then again, Kyle Hamilton wasn't supposed to either. Tyler Guyton, Oklahoma, 6'8", 322 pounds, 22 years old. Guyton is not as fast as Mims, but he is just as, if not more so, naturally athletic, with an impressive 7'5" second 3-cone and a good, nearly 9-foot broad jump, and an exceptional 34.5-inch vertical. He has the movement and the size to keep edge guys on the outside and the quickness to stay with them if they try to come back inside. With a late first-round projection, he may be in play for the Ravens at the 30th pick. Next up, Graham Barton, Duke, 6'5", 313 pounds, 21 years old. Barton is one of the few tackles that wasn't able to participate in the combine, but that's going to have little impact on his stock, as around the league he's known to be as technically sound at several positions across the offensive line as some starters in the pros. His arm length is one of the only legitimate concerns, along with his overall size versus some larger D-end rushers. Being projected as a late first-round pick, the Ravens would most likely be in play for Barton. Next up, Jordan Morgan, Arizona, 6'5", 311 pounds, 22 years old. Morgan is a fast and athletic left tackle that has seemingly very little negatives to go along with his game. His arm length is less than ideal, but having excellent bend and change of direction ability will be reasons for teams to overlook the small knock on him. With the top of the second-round projection, he should be well in play for the Ravens and will certainly be one that they should consider when it's their turn. Last in this list, Patrick Paul, Houston, 6'8", 331 pounds, 23 years old. A bit of a dark horse for me, Paul has great size and above-average athleticism, with his worst trait being smaller hands than the average, attached to some of the longest arms in the draft, with the longest wingspan in the whole draft. In the last 3 years, at his tackle position, he allowed 3 sacks in the first year, then 1, and then last year, 0 sacks. I like Paul as an option for the Ravens should they potentially trade back a bit, as he's projected to be available late in the second round. Also of note, the Ravens have recently met with Patrick Paul. Now, this last group may not be the position that the Ravens should or will target in the first, but it is also the most exciting to talk about, and it's the wide receiver group. It's one of the deepest and talented we've seen in the past few years. Just like the tackles, though, there's going to be several receivers that will be unavailable when the Ravens are on the clock, so I try and list the 5 that I believe the Ravens will not only be interested in, but also have a shot at actually getting. Starting with Troy Franklin from Oregon, 6'2", 176 pounds, 21 years old. With a reputation to be a deep threat type burner, but with a 6'2" frame, he could be a great match with Zay Flowers underneath. I worry a bit about his durability as he is also the same weight as Zay and several inches taller, but he has a similar proportions to Devontae Smith with the Eagles, and he seems to be just fine. Running a 4.41 with a 39-inch vertical is a great way to put the NFL teams on notice, not that his 81 receptions for almost 1,400 yards and 14 touchdowns didn't already do that in his last year. Next up is Roman Wilson from Michigan, 5'11", 185 pounds, 22 years old. While I don't want the Ravens to have too many short, fast guys, like all the media would say if we drafted Wilson, with Zay already on the roster, I think having two matchup nightmares to pair along with Bateman would actually make the Ravens' offense extremely difficult to stop. Having three great route runners would be Todd Monken's dream. I only worry about some of the injury concerns he has, taking some of the shine off of his game, as the Ravens fans don't need any more of that. Third in this group, I have Adon Mitchell. Sorry if I butchered that, from Texas. 6'2", 205 pounds, 21 years old. Mitchell is an absolute beast when it comes to his speed and explosiveness. With a 4.34 second 40 and a 39.5-inch vertical leap and an absurd 11'4" broad jump, he not only destroyed the combine, but with his production at Texas with 55 receptions for 845 yards and 11 touchdowns, all but boosted his draft stock to nearly first-round status. I would love if the Ravens added Mitchell to their roster and made this offense unstoppable through the air. Second to last here, we have Germaine Burton from Alabama, 6 foot, 196, 22 years old. Burton is a great outside X-type receiver whose ability to go up and get the ball out of the air was demonstrated by his 38.5-inch vertical jump and his 11'1" broad jump. While in this draft, a 4.45 second 40 doesn't seem great, it is, especially when paired with the ability to go up for contested catches. His long speed matches well with the shorter and intermediate routes usually run by both Bateman and Flowers for the Ravens currently. And our last potential is Xavier Legette. Again, sorry if I butcher it. South Carolina, 6'3", 221 pounds, 23 years old. I can't figure out if Legette is 6'1" or 6'3" because I've heard it both ways, but either way, his athleticism was on full display in the draft with a 4.39 second 40, a 40-inch vertical, and a 10.5-foot broad jump. With 71 receptions for 1,255 yards and 7 touchdowns, we also know that on the field, production is there too. Pair these physical traits with the arm talent of Lamar, and they could be a dominant force on the field. So there you have it. Those are 5 players from 4 categories that I think the Ravens are specifically going to be looking at in either the first or the second round of this draft. Now, whether they take any of the guys I've listed or they have some specific other best available athlete, that's up to the Ravens front office. But what did you guys think of my list? Are there any other athletes that you guys saw from any position group that really stand out to you that you think the Ravens should go out and get? Let me know in the comments section below. And as always, if you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this type of content. And as always, I will see you all later. Stay safe out there and go Ravens.